Joining us now is Fox News contributor and Fox Nation host Tammy Bruce. Tammy, thank you so much for joining us on the U.S. Report. As I just discussed, I don't think things are going quite as well for Kamala Harris as the media claims. Am I wrong about this, or is the gaslight operation in full swing?
I think just the way that she achieved the position tells you that there's a lot of stuff going on in the background. Clearly, gaslighting, manipulation is at the heart of what they've always done. I love your commentary. I think that, the same people now, Merrick Garland, the FBI, the establishment, the DOJ, were having hands-on when it came to the previous Russia hoax. It's interesting in that I think they believe that Americans are like crows, that if they show us a shiny object, we'll get completely distracted and won't ask any questions. And that's the goal, I think. The goal is twofold. I come from the left. I made the shift to the right. But I can tell you about the left that the goal is really to distract and to make fearful, to get people to be depressed, which is what part of the polls are about. But the nature of the choices they're making, like with Russia, they need to have something to say that makes it appear as though the country's under threat, Democrats are under threat, and that they're here to save us. It keeps them from having to discuss the economy, the rise in crime, our erased southern border, terrorists in the country, the risk that all Americans are at when it comes to the condition of the world, their responsibility regarding the Afghanistan withdrawal and that debacle, how that likely provoked Putin thinking it's okay to move into Ukraine, Iran's use of Hamas and Hezbollah to attack Israel. They don't want you to talk about that. They don't want you to ask about that. They don't want you to ask about plans. They want you to just be fearful of a Russian invader. And of course, that's all they've always had. And that's why it's coming up again.
And I mean, I find it hilarious myself, having grown up in the Cold War, that suddenly the Democrats are terrified of Russia, given that they had a slightly different attitude once upon a time. But I just want to go back to the polls for a second, because, some people are pointing out that some of these recent polls have been disproportionately sampling Democrats over Republicans to, as one campaign strategist said, tamp down support and donations for Trump. That's the Operation Demoralize I was talking about before. But here's something else that's really interesting. In the Real Clear Politics average of polls in 2016, when Trump won, the Democrats were up by twice as much at this point in the race as they are now. This tells me that there's something else happening. What do you think?
Yes, I mean, that's what's interesting. When you look at where Harris is now versus where Hillary Clinton was and where Joe Biden was, she is far below even where they were. So we're looking at definitely still an artificial lift. She got no bump out of the convention because already the lift was as much as they could deliver with this shift into the fact that, she was the second coming and she was, the next great president compared to Lincoln and Kennedy, et cetera. Americans, though, are not dumb. We're very busy. We're trying to raise our families and try to get a better future for ourselves. So there's no real place for any more lift to go, but that's as far as they could get it. I think that what we've got here is, I think all polls that are for public consumption are essentially propaganda. They're meant to move a message. And then you have the internal polls, which are conducted somewhat differently because the campaigns have to know the reality. And as you mentioned about New Hampshire, my goodness, she should be. We see her being supposedly, double digits up in that state. To use especially with the short amount of time we have left, to use resources to go to New Hampshire when you should be in Nevada or Arizona or even Michigan. Or North Carolina and Georgia. It was kind of a signal that they imagined losing those 4 delegates, but it does tell you that, and I think this is accurate, that just before the election in 2016, it was like Hillary 90% was going to win the election.
Yeah.
And so Trump has always outperformed the polls because you can change polls. You can get what you want to see You can definitely oversample Democrats, but you can also oversample an age group. You can undersample independents, which is Trump is leading nicely with independents. One recent poll has him getting 28% of Black Americans and a majority of Hispanics. But if you decide to poll people on the West Coast, you're going to get a more liberal framework than if you took the poll during a time of day where you could reach people in the Midwest or the South. So there's many different ways to tweak this. And I think that we've seen this all the time. And even with the monumental media support, kind of the obscene state media-like media support for Harris, and the tweaking of the polls, they can't get her up to a point where it looks like she's really strong. I think they're seeing something very different internally. And Americans, no matter who they support, because this is really a nonpartisan issue, really look at what it is you've seen for the last several years. If you want more of what has happened to this country and to the world, then vote for the Democrats. But they've confessed to you what their agenda is. You know what Donald Trump can deliver because he's delivered it as well. He's delivered the strongest economy in human history, energy independence, secure borders, no new wars. And I think Americans are going to make their decisions based on the economy and who it is they think is going to deliver based on their performance in the past, not on what they say.
Yeah, and you know what's also fascinating to me about this, and everything you say there about the polls is absolutely fascinating and I think spot on, and people need to understand the way these things are used to demoralize people, especially on the right. But the other thing, you had the convention bump, you had the CNN interview, which really, didn't move the needle. Now we're going to see more of Kamala Harris this week at this debate, and the Harris campaign clearly wanted to have some sort of I'm speaking moment where, Trump would interrupt, but now that's not going to be possible because the mic's going to be switched off when the other person is not speaking. What do you expect from this debate, and is there a chance that Donald Trump how do you think Trump is going to go? Because everybody is saying, he needs to sort of step back like he did with Joe Biden and let her speak and let people sort of make up their own mind, because when they see her, they don't really like what they see.
Yes, and of course, it reveals so much. It's a confession that she really wants a viral moment for social media. Again, she's not thinking about, what do I say about what I've done to this country for the last 4 years being the incumbent, because she is positioned in the debate as the incumbent appropriately. So you've got, no concern about what are you going to say about the economy and about Israel and about Ukraine and about what China's doing with Taiwan. What are you going to say about crime and the border besides copying Trump ideas? But it's got to be more in detail. And she's not thinking about that. She wants bread and circuses. She wants a moment that they can put in an ad. This is about the leader of the free world, someone who will control all of the nuclear weapons, someone who would determine the life and death of tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people around the world. The world relies on the United States economically, but also as a beacon for freedom. And she thinks if we're entertained with a moment, that's an insult to the Democrat base. It's certainly an insult to feminists.
Tammy Bruce, absolutely brilliant as always. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. We'll see you next time here on the U.S. Report.
Thank you, sir.